My mother cried at my wedding because she said she was losing her baby girl. What she really meant was she was losing control of my trust fund. And I didn't realize until I found my dead father's signature on a document dated 3 years after he died. I used to think my family was just difficult. You know the type. Passive-aggressive comments at dinner, favoritism disguised as tough love, constant guilt-tripping. The kind of family where everyone smiles in Christmas photos while secretly keeping score of who owes what emotionally. I never thought they were dangerous. I definitely never thought they were capable of ruining someone's life for money, especially mine. Growing up in Connecticut, my younger brother Tyler was the golden child. Tyler could crash Mom's car at 16, and somehow I'd get yelled at for stressing your brother out. Tyler failed out of college twice, and my mother still called him a free spirit. Meanwhile, I got straight A's, worked part-time, earned scholarships, and somehow I was still cold, difficult, and ungrateful. My father, Daniel Harper, was the only person who ever saw it. He used to pull me aside after dinner when Mom started criticizing me over nothing, and whisper, "You're not crazy, Ellie. Don't let them rewrite reality." I didn't understand how important that sentence would become later. Dad came from old money, not billionaire money, but enough. His family owned commercial real estate in New York and Boston. Quiet wealth, the kind that sits in trusts and investments instead of Lamborghinis. Mom married into it when she was 24. Dad died when I was 19. Officially, it was a boating accident. Unofficially, well, that's where the story gets ugly. After Dad died, everything changed almost immediately. My mother transformed into someone colder, sharper, like she'd been pretending for years and finally got tired of acting. She married again less than a year later to a man named Richard. Richard had that fake motivational speaker personality. Perfect teeth, expensive watches, dead eyes. He constantly called me kiddo, even though I was 20. "You should be grateful your mother sacrificed so much for you," he'd say whenever I questioned anything. Sacrificed what? My father left enough money to support all of us comfortably. But somehow, within 2 years, Mom was constantly talking about financial pressure. Tyler got a new Audi. Richard bought a lake house. Mom started wearing Cartier bracelets. Yet when I asked about my college fund, suddenly there were complications. "Your father's estate is tied up," Mom said one Thanksgiving, while sipping wine that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. "You'll need to learn independence eventually." I remember staring at her because I knew something felt wrong. Dad had planned everything meticulously. He was obsessive about finances. There was no way he forgot my education. But every time I questioned it, Tyler jumped in. "Jesus, Ellie, Dad dies and all you care about is money?" That line destroyed me for years, because I started believing maybe I really was selfish. So I took out loans, worked 2 jobs, slept 4 hours a night through nursing school, while Tyler found himself in Miami using family money. Meanwhile, Mom kept posting Facebook photos about family values and strength through hardship. The worst part? Everyone believed her. She was charming in public, the grieving widow, the devoted mother. I looked bitter by comparison. Then came the engagement dinner. That was the first crack in their perfect mask. I was 28 by then, engaged to my fiancé Noah, who's honestly the reason I survived all this without losing my mind. Noah came from a normal family, like actually normal. His parents hugged each other in the kitchen for no reason. They apologized when they were wrong. The first time his mother asked me what kind of birthday cake I wanted, I almost cried in her pantry because nobody in my family had ever cared what I wanted. At our engagement dinner, Tyler got drunk and started making jokes. "Guess Ellie finally found a guy desperate enough." Everyone laughed except Noah. Then Tyler added, "Just make sure she doesn't inherit Dad's crazy genes." Silence. Complete silence. My stomach dropped because my father was never mentally ill. Ever. I looked at Mom. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "What does that mean?" I asked. Tyler smirked into his whiskey. "Oops." Richard immediately stepped in. "Your brother's joking." But Tyler kept grinning at me. And for the first time in years, I felt something click into place. Not sadness, not confusion. Instinct. Like my brain suddenly whispered, "They're hiding something." That night I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I called my Aunt Vivian, Dad's older sister. We weren't close because Mom hated her, said she was toxic. Looking back, that should have been my first clue. Vivian answered half asleep. "Ellie? Did my dad have mental illness?" Silence. Then, "What the hell did your mother tell you?" My blood went cold. Vivian sounded angry. Really angry. I told her about Tyler's comment. She exhaled sharply. "Your father spent the last 6 months of his life terrified." "Terrified of what?" Another silence. "He thought someone was stealing from him." I sat straight up in bed. Vivian continued carefully. "Daniel hired a forensic accountant shortly before he died." My heart started pounding. "What?" "He believed funds were disappearing from his accounts. Millions." I genuinely stopped breathing for a second. "Who?" "He suspected Richard." "Richard didn't even know us yet." "Officially." That word shattered something in my brain. Vivian told me Dad discovered Mom had been having an affair with Richard for years before the accident. Years. I physically got sick, ran to the bathroom and threw up while holding the phone. My mother destroyed our family while pretending to mourn my father publicly. But it got worse. Much worse. Vivian lowered her voice. "Your father was preparing to change the trust entirely before he died." "What trust?" "Ellie," she whispered, horrified. "You really don't know, do you? Turns out my father left me nearly everything. Not Tyler. Me. 80% of his estate was supposed to transfer to me when I turned 30, because according to Vivian, Dad no longer trusted Mom or Tyler with money. He'd seen how reckless they were. The trust was specifically designed to protect me. I nearly dropped the phone. "That's impossible." "No, sweetheart. What's impossible is your mother pretending you were broke for 10 years. My entire body went numb. "How much?" Vivian hesitated. "Around 12 million. I think my brain rejected the number entirely because I just sat there staring at the bathroom tiles. $12 million. And I was drowning in student debt while my family acted like I was a burden. There is no way Mom could hide that. Unless the documents changed after your father died. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I called the law firm that handled Dad's estate. The receptionist got weird immediately when I introduced myself. "One moment, Miss Harper." Then another voice came on. Older male voice. Careful tone. "Miss Harper, your mother instructed us years ago not to discuss trust matters directly with you." I almost laughed. "I'm pretty sure that's not legal." Silence again. Then he quietly said, "I think you should come in." 2 days later, Noah drove me into Manhattan because my hands were shaking too badly to drive. The attorney, Mr. Feldman, looked like he hadn't slept in years. He closed his office door before speaking. "Your father amended his trust approximately 8 months before his death." He slid papers across the desk. "You were primary beneficiary." My eyes scanned the document. My father's signature stared back at me. Real, familiar. Then Feldman handed me another document. This amendment superseded the previous version. The date hit me first. 3 years after Dad died. I frowned. Then my brain caught up. I looked up slowly. That's impossible. Feldman looked physically ill. Yes, my father's signature was on it, perfectly copied. A forged amendment transferring control of the estate to my mother and Tyler. My pulse roared in my ears. You knew? I suspected. You suspected? I stood so fast the chair slammed backward. Noah grabbed my arm gently before I completely lost it. Feldman swallowed hard. Your mother threatened litigation if we questioned the amendment. My father was dead. I know. The room spun. Everything suddenly made sense. The missing college fund, Tyler's lifestyle, Mom's sudden wealth, Richard appearing out of nowhere, my father's paranoia before his death. I whispered the question I was suddenly terrified to ask. Was Dad's accident investigated? Feldman looked at me for a very long time before answering. Not thoroughly enough. For the next 3 weeks, I barely functioned like a normal human being. I went to work, smiled at patients, charted vitals, answered emails, and every second underneath it all, my brain kept screaming the same sentence over and over. My family stole my life. Noah wanted me to go to the police immediately. Vivian wanted me to hire the most aggressive attorney in New York. But I couldn't move yet, because something felt wrong, bigger than fraud. People don't forge signatures on $12 million trusts unless they're desperate or dangerous. And the more I thought about my father's accident, the less accidental it sounded. Dad had been an experienced sailor for 20 years. He taught me how to navigate before I could drive. The official report said he went out alone during rough weather and somehow fell overboard without activating his emergency beacon. That never made sense. Dad was obsessive about safety. He wore life vests in calm weather. Suddenly, I couldn't stop replaying tiny memories I'd ignored for years. Mom insisting Dad had been stressed lately. Tyler constantly repeating that Dad had become paranoid. Richard appearing at the funeral acting like he already belonged there. And the biggest thing of all, nobody let me see the accident photos. Too traumatic, Mom had said. At the time, I believed her because I was 19 and shattered with grief. Now I wondered what they were hiding. Noah finally sat me down one night in our apartment kitchen. Ellie, he said carefully, you need to decide whether you want revenge or truth. What's the difference? Truth ends with justice. Revenge keeps going. I remember staring at him because I wanted both. God, I wanted both. I wanted my mother exposed publicly. I wanted Tyler humiliated. I wanted Richard dragged out of his country club in handcuffs. But most of all, I wanted my father back. And since I couldn't have that, I wanted them to hurt. I need proof, I whispered. Noah nodded slowly. Then don't warn them. So I pretended everything was normal. That became my strategy. Smile, nod, play the role they expected. Meanwhile, Vivian connected me with a forensic accountant named Rachel Kim. Rachel was terrifying in the best possible way. Tiny woman, ice-cold voice, former federal fraud investigator. She looked through the trust documents for maybe 6 minutes before saying, "Your mother's sloppy." Sloppy? Greedy people usually are. She pointed at the forged amendment. The signature isn't the real problem. What is? The witnesses. I frowned. Rachel zoomed in on the scanned signatures. Both witnesses worked for a company owned by Richard. My stomach dropped. Meaning? meaning this wasn't random fraud. This was coordinated. Over the next month, Rachel uncovered enough financial manipulation to bury them all in civil court. Money transferred between shell companies, estate taxes mysteriously altered, assets liquidated below market value. But the most disturbing discovery came from Tyler. "Your brother has a gambling problem," Rachel said one afternoon. A massive one. Turns out, Tyler owed over $400,000 to private lenders in Atlantic City. Suddenly, his expensive lifestyle made sense. He wasn't rich. He was drowning. And somebody kept rescuing him financially. Mom. Using my father's estate. "It gets worse," Rachel added. She handed me a file. Tyler had taken out life insurance policies. Multiple. One of them listed my mother as beneficiary. Another listed Richard. "Why would Tyler need so many policies?" I asked quietly. Rachel leaned back in her chair. "That's not the right question." My chest tightened. "What's the right question?" She held my gaze. "Why does your family treat death like a financial strategy?" That sentence stayed in my head for days. Then came the dinner invitation. Mom called me personally, which almost never happened. "Family dinner Sunday," she said sweetly. "It's important." Her voice sounded unusually warm. Fake warm. The kind she used in front of church friends. "Tyler has news." My instincts screamed at me not to go, but I needed to see them now. Needed to understand how people could smile after destroying someone's life. Sunday night, Noah and I drove to my mother's lake house, the one she claimed she barely afforded. The second I walked in, I knew something was off. Tyler looked nervous, sweaty. Richard kept drinking bourbon too fast. Mom was overcompensating with cheerful energy. Then Tyler stood up holding champagne. "I'm engaged." Everyone clacked except me, because the woman beside him looked terrified. Her name was Sophie, 23 years old, quiet, polite, and bruises hidden under makeup near her wrist. My stomach twisted immediately. During dinner, Tyler kept interrupting her, correcting her stories, squeezing her thigh too hard under the table. I knew that behavior. Dad never acted like that. Richard did. Controlling men always think ownership equals love. At one point, Sophie accidentally spilled wine. Tyler instantly snapped. "Jesus Christ, Sophie, can you not embarrass me for 5 minutes?" The entire table went silent. Sophie started apologizing rapidly. My mother actually laughed awkwardly and said, "Tyler's just passionate." I looked at her in disbelief. Suddenly I was 12 again, sitting silently while Tyler screamed at me for touching his Xbox, and Mom telling me not to provoke your brother. Same pattern, different victim. Later that night, while Tyler and Richard smoked cigars outside, Sophie cornered me near the bathroom. "Can I ask you something?" she whispered. "Sure." Her eyes darted nervously toward the patio doors. "Did Tyler ever hurt you?" My blood froze. "What?" She immediately looked scared. "Forget it." I grabbed her arm gently. "Sophie." She started crying instantly, not dramatic crying, terrified crying. "He gets angry," she whispered. "And your mother keeps telling me relationships are hard and I need to support him because he's under pressure." Rage exploded inside me so fast I nearly shook. Mom knew. Of course she knew. Toxic families protect abusers because exposing one threatens the whole system. "You need to leave him," I said immediately. Sophie laughed weakly through tears. "I can't." "Why not?" Then she said the sentence that changed everything. "Because I know what happened to your dad." I swear the room stopped moving. "What?" Sophie covered her mouth instantly, like she regretted saying it. "Sophie," I whispered, heart pounding violently. "What do you know?" Before she could answer, Tyler walked back inside. Sophie flinched so visibly it made me sick. Tyler smiled at us, but his eyes locked onto Sophie with warning. "Everything okay?" "Fine," Sophie said quickly. Too quickly. On the drive home, Noah kept glancing at me. "You think she knows something real?" "I think she's terrified." 2 nights later, Sophie called me at 1:13 a.m. I'll never forget the time because that call changed my entire life. She was whispering, crying. "Tyler found out I talked to you." I sat upright instantly. "Are you safe?" "No." Crashing sounds in the background. A male voice yelling, "Tyler." "Sophie, open a damn door." My heart started racing. "Call 911. He'll kill me." Then Tyler's voice got louder. "Who are you talking to?" Sophie whispered fast. "Your father didn't fall off the boat." Then the line disconnected. Noah and I were in the car within 30 seconds. We called police while driving to Tyler's condo in Stamford. By the time we got there, Sophie was outside barefoot in the rain with blood on her lip, and Tyler screaming at officers about crazy women ruining men's lives. Typical. Absolutely typical. The second Sophie saw me, she burst into tears. "He knows," she whispered. "He knows I found the recordings." Every hair on my body stood up. What recordings? Tyler lunged toward her at that exact moment, screaming, "Shut the F up!" Police restrained him immediately. Sophie was shaking uncontrollably inside the ambulance, while Noah spoke with officers. She finally looked at me and whispered, "Richard kept old tapes." "What kind of tapes?" "Conversations." My chest tightened. "About what?" Sophie swallowed hard. "About your dad." According to Sophie, she accidentally discovered a locked storage box months earlier while Tyler was drunk. Inside were old financial records, burner phones, and cassette tapes. Real cassette tapes. Richard apparently recorded conversations obsessively because he trusted nobody. One tape contained an argument between Richard and my mother from weeks before Dad died. Sophie heard enough to panic. "Your mom kept saying it was supposed to scare him, not kill him." I felt physically cold. "Kill him?" Sophie nodded slowly. "And Richard said, none of this would have happened if Daniel signed the damn papers willingly." I couldn't breathe. I genuinely couldn't breathe. "Where are the tapes now?" Sophie started sobbing harder. "Tyler took them yesterday." For a moment, I thought we'd lost everything. Then Sophie said, "But I copied one onto my phone." Noah immediately drove us back home while Sophie sat shaking under a blanket in the back seat. At 3:47 a.m., we listened to the recording together in our kitchen. Static crackled first, then voices. Richard's voice. "You think crying changes what happened?" My mother. "He wasn't supposed to go overboard." Silence. Then Richard again. "He panicked. That's not my fault." My vision blurred instantly. Mom sounded hysterical. "Tyler was there." And then came the sentence that destroyed my entire reality. Richard hissed. "Then maybe your idiot son shouldn't have hit him with the flashlight." Noah grabbed my arm because I nearly collapsed. On the tape, my mother started sobbing. Richard lowered his voice. "Listen to me carefully. If this comes out, Tyler goes to prison. You understand?" My ears rang violently. Tyler was there. Tyler was on the boat the night Dad died. My brother helped kill our father, and my mother covered it up. I started vomiting into the kitchen sink while Sophie cried behind me. Noah turned off the tape because none of us could handle another second. But the worst part wasn't even the murder. It was realizing they let me mourn him beside them for 10 years. 10 years of birthdays, holidays, family photos, hugs. Lies. They watched me cry for my father while knowing exactly how he died. And suddenly every fake comforting smile from my mother became horrifying in hindsight. She wasn't grieving with me. She was managing me. I didn't go to work the next morning. I didn't sleep either. I just sat on my kitchen floor wrapped in a blanket while the recording played over and over in my head like some kind of psychological torture. Tyler was there. My little brother, the kid I used to help with homework, the kid I defended when Dad wanted to punish him for crashing the car drunk at 17, was there the night our father died. At around 8 a.m., Noah finally crouched in front of me and said quietly, "Ellie, they're going to realize Sophie talked." He was right, which meant two things. First, Sophie wasn't safe. Second, neither was I. Rachel and Vivian came over within the hour. We locked every door, closed every blind, and listened to the recording again. Rachel's expression never changed, but when it ended, she said one sentence that made my stomach twist. "This isn't just fraud anymore." Vivian looked pale. "Do we go to the police?" "Eventually," Rachel said carefully. "But right now, we need leverage." "Leverage?" I snapped. "I have a recording of my family covering up murder." Rachel stared directly at me. "And rich people bury evidence all the time, especially when they've had 10 years to prepare." I hated that she was right, because once the shock settled, reality hit hard. Richard had money, lawyers, connections. My mother had perfected manipulation for decades. Tyler would absolutely claim the tape was fake or edited. And worst of all, there was no body. Dad's body was never recovered after the accident. That suddenly felt very important. Rachel leaned forward. "We need the originals." "The tapes?" She nodded. "And whatever else Richard kept." Sophie wiped her eyes. "He has a storage unit." Every head turned toward her. "What?" Sophie swallowed nervously. "Tyler and Richard go there constantly when they're fighting about money." "Where?" "White Plains, near the interstate." Noah immediately shook his head. "Absolutely not." "We can't break into a storage unit," Vivian added. But Sophie looked terrified again. "Tyler said if anything ever happened, Richard kept insurance there." Rachel's eyes narrowed instantly. Insurance usually means evidence. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then I heard myself say, "I'm going." Noah looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Ellie." "They stole my life," I said quietly. "They killed my father." My voice cracked. "I'm done being scared of them." So that night, at almost midnight, the 5 of us drove to White Plains in Noah's SUV like we were characters in some terrible crime movie. Sophie knew the gate code because Tyler once made her drive in there while he was drunk. The storage facility was mostly empty. Cold fluorescent lights. Endless rows of metal doors. My heart pounded so hard I thought I'd faint. Unit 317. Sophie pointed with trembling hands. "That one." Rachel immediately noticed the lock was newer than the others. "Interesting." Noah muttered, "We should call police." But before anyone could answer, we heard tires screech outside. Headlights flashed through the gaps under the doors. Sophie went white instantly. "Oh my God!" Tyler's voice echoed from outside. "Sophie!" My entire body locked up. "How did he find us?" Sophie started crying. "He tracks my phone." "Shit," Noah hissed. We heard another car door slam. Richard. Then my mother's voice. "Ellie, honey, please come outside." "Honey, I almost laughed. Even now, she was performing motherhood. Rachel moved fast. Back exit, now! But Tyler was already running down the aisle toward us. I'll never forget his face. Red, sweating, completely unhinged. "You stupid bitch!" he screamed at Sophie. Noah stepped between them immediately. Tyler shoved him hard. "Move. Don't touch her," Noah snapped. Then Richard appeared behind Tyler, looking horrifyingly calm. "Ellie," he said smoothly, "you're making a very serious mistake." I stared at him. "Did you kill my father?" Silence. My mother started crying instantly, real tears this time. "Ellie, please, answer me!" Tyler suddenly exploded. "He ruined everything!" Everyone froze. Tyler's chest heaved violently. "Dad was going to cut me off completely." My mother whispered, "Tyler." But Tyler was spiraling now, years of buried guilt erupting at once. He treated me like garbage, like I was some failure compared to her. He pointed at me with pure hatred. Perfect Ellie, perfect little princess. I just stared at him because the insanity of it all hit me at once. He murdered our father because Dad finally stopped enabling him. Richard stepped forward sharply. "Enough." But Tyler ignored him. "It was supposed to scare him," he yelled. Same sentence from the tape. "Richard said if we pressured him, he'd sign the trust back over." My mother started sobbing harder. "Stop talking." Tyler looked almost manic now. "Dad fought back. He hit me first." Then he looked directly at me and screamed, "It was an accident!" And there it was. The truth. Finally. I wish I could say I felt satisfaction. I didn't. I just felt empty. Tyler killed our father during a fight over money. Richard helped cover it up. My mother protected them both. 10 years of lies because nobody wanted the money train to stop. Then everything got worse, because Richard suddenly pulled out a gun. Sophie gasped. Noah moved in front of me instantly. Richard's face stayed eerily calm. "Phones," he said quietly. "All of them." My mother looked horrified. "Richard!" "Shut up, Diane." That was the moment I realized something terrifying. Richard never planned to let this become public. Tyler looked panicked now, too. "Richard, what are you doing?" "Cleaning up your mess." Noah slowly raised his hands. "You don't want to do this." Richard almost smiled. "You'd be amazed what people do when millions of dollars are involved." I remember every tiny detail after that with horrifying clarity. The buzzing fluorescent lights, Sophie shaking beside me, Tyler sweating through his shirt, my mother whispering, "Please," like she still thought she could emotionally manipulate reality itself. And then Rachel did something none of us expected. She laughed. Just laughed softly. Richard frowned. "What's funny?" Rachel pulled her phone from her pocket very slowly. "You really think I walked in here without backup?" Richard's expression changed instantly. Then we heard sirens. Lots of sirens. Red and blue lights flashed outside the building. Rachel smiled coldly. "Former federal investigator, remember?" Chaos erupted. Tyler screamed at Richard. Richard grabbed my mother's arm violently. Noah tackled Tyler before he could run. Officers stormed the building from both entrances, shouting commands. Within seconds, Richard was on the ground in handcuffs, still trying to scream legal threats. My mother completely collapsed emotionally. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she kept crying. "I didn't mean it." Tyler looked at me while police dragged him past, and I swear to God, he still blamed me. "You ruined this family," he spat. That sentence haunted me afterward, because it perfectly explained everything wrong with toxic families. The person exposing abuse becomes the villain, not the abusers themselves. But the real shock came 3 days later. Because police opened storage unit 317, and inside, they found enough evidence to destroy all of them forever. Financial records, fake signatures, burner phones, the original trust documents, the actual flashlight Tyler used the night Dad died. And buried underneath everything else, a duffel bag full of cash and fake passports. Richard had been planning to flee the country. My mother knew. Tyler knew. They were going to disappear the second the fraud investigation started closing in. But that still wasn't the biggest twist. The biggest twist came from the coroner's re-investigation. Remember how Dad's body was never recovered? Yeah, that wasn't entirely true. A body had washed ashore 3 counties away 6 days after the accident, decomposed beyond recognition, quickly cremated after identification through dental records. Except those dental records were falsified. The body wasn't my father's, which meant for 10 years, nobody actually knew where Daniel Harper was. The FBI got involved after that. Suddenly, this wasn't just inheritance fraud or accidental manslaughter. This became a missing person investigation connected to financial crimes and obstruction. News vans started showing up outside my apartment. Tyler's mugshot hit national media because apparently wealthy family murder scandals are America's favorite entertainment. My mother's country club friends vanished overnight. Richard's business partners publicly denied knowing him. Everybody ran. Cowards always do. Then, 2 weeks after the arrests, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Thank God I didn't. Ellie? The voice was older, rougher, but familiar. My entire body stopped moving. Dad? Silence on the line, then a shaky breath. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I dropped the phone, literally dropped it onto the kitchen floor. Noah picked it up while I stood there, unable to breathe, because the impossible truth hit me all at once. My father wasn't dead. He had been alive this entire time. I don't think there's a psychological term for hearing your dead father's voice after mourning him for 10 years. Your brain doesn't process it normally. It breaks reality apart piece by piece. One second I was standing in my kitchen making coffee. The next I was on the floor hyperventilating, while Noah held the phone speaker with both hands, because neither of us trusted what we were hearing. Dad? I whispered again. The man on the line started crying quietly. My father almost never cried. That scared me more than anything. Ellie, he said, voice shaking. I wanted to call so many times. I couldn't even form coherent thoughts. Anger, relief, confusion, grief, all of it slammed into me simultaneously. Where are you? Silence. Then, safe. My entire body went cold again. Safe from who? I already knew the answer. Did they try to kill you? Another silence. Then I heard him inhale shakily. Yes. Noah looked at me with wide eyes while I pressed my hand over my mouth to stop myself from sobbing. Dad explained everything over the next hour, and honestly, even now it sounds insane. But every piece fit perfectly. The night of the accident, Dad confronted my mother and Richard after discovering the forged financial transfers. Tyler was there because Richard had dragged him into the scheme years earlier through gambling debts and promises of inheritance money. Dad planned to expose all of them and cut Tyler out of the trust completely. The argument happened on the boat because Dad thought public places were safer than the house. He was wrong. Tyler panicked during the fight and struck Dad in the head with the flashlight. Dad fell overboard unconscious. Richard assumed he drowned, but he didn't. A fishing boat several miles away found him barely alive hours later. severe concussion, broken ribs, hypothermia. Dad remembered almost nothing for days afterward. By the time his memory partially returned, news reports already declared him dead. "I saw the coverage from the hospital television," Dad said quietly. "Your mother identified a body immediately." My skin crawled. They buried another man just to close the case quickly. "Why didn't you come home?" I asked through tears. His answer shattered me again. "Because Richard found me." Apparently, one of Richard's associates worked at the private recovery clinic where Dad was transferred. The moment Richard learned Dad survived, everything changed. Dad started receiving threats. Nurses were bribed. One doctor privately warned him not to trust anyone connected to the Harper estate. "Richard told me if I resurfaced publicly, you'd suffer for it," Dad said. "He said they'd destroy your future before anyone believed me." I sat there stunned because the horrifying part was, he probably wasn't wrong. At 19, I would have trusted my mother completely. Everyone would have called Dad delusional, especially after Richard and Mom spent months telling people Dad had become paranoid before his death. They built the narrative early. Smart. Evil, but smart. "So you disappeared?" Noah asked carefully. Dad sighed heavily. "At first I planned it temporarily. Then the years passed." "Years?" I snapped suddenly. "You left me with them for years?" Silence again. Heavy silence. Then I heard my father break completely. "I know," he whispered. "I know." And for the first time since the call began, anger finally overtook the shock. "Do you have any idea what they did to me?" I shouted. "Mom stole everything. Tyler—" My voice cracked violently. "I buried you." Dad started crying harder. "Ellie, I watched from a distance." "What?" Noah grabbed my arm because I was shaking uncontrollably now. Dad admitted he secretly monitored my life for years through Vivian. He knew about nursing school, knew about the debt, knew about my engagement to Noah. He even attended my graduation secretly. "You were there?" I whispered. "Back row," he said softly. "Blue baseball cap." I suddenly remembered seeing an older man watching me after the ceremony. At the time, I barely noticed him because Mom was busy screaming at Tyler in the parking lot for showing up late and drunk. Oh my God. Dad was there while I hugged my mother and thanked her for supporting me. The cruelty of that reality nearly broke me. "Why now?" Noah asked quietly. "Because Richard ran out of control," Dad answered immediately. "And because Tyler finally confessed." Apparently, federal investigators confronted Tyler separately after the storage unit discovery. Tyler immediately tried cutting a plea deal by blaming Richard for everything. But Tyler made one fatal mistake. He admitted Dad survived the fall temporarily before Richard decided to finish the problem. My blood turned to ice. What does that mean? Dad went silent again, long enough that I felt nauseous. "Dad?" Finally, he answered. "Richard came to the hospital." My stomach dropped. "He unplugged my heart monitor while I was unconscious." Noah cursed under his breath. But a nurse caught him before permanent damage happened. I genuinely thought I might faint. Richard didn't just cover up attempted murder. He tried again at the hospital. Why wasn't he arrested then? "Money," Dad said bitterly, "and fear." The nurse disappeared shortly afterward. Nobody knew if she quit or got paid off. Dad realized the safest way to survive was staying dead legally while secretly building evidence. Over 10 years, he collected financial records, recordings, offshore account details, everything. He was preparing to expose them eventually. But then Sophie found the tapes accidentally and accelerated everything. "I never wanted you dragged into this," Dad whispered. I laughed bitterly through tears. A little late for that. 3 days later, I finally saw him in person. FBI arranged the meeting privately because technically the investigation was still active. I thought maybe I'd collapse emotionally the second I saw him. Instead, the first thing I felt was shock. My father looked old. Not physically old exactly, emotionally old. Haunted. 10 years of hiding changes a person. The second he saw me, he broke down crying again. And suddenly I was crying too, because despite everything, he was still my dad. I hugged him so hard neither of us could breathe properly. "I'm sorry," he kept repeating into my hair. "I'm so sorry." Part of me wanted to scream at him for abandoning me. Another part understood he genuinely believed he was protecting me. Trauma makes people choose survival first, sometimes at terrible cost. We talked for almost 6 hours. He filled in gaps investigators hadn't shared yet. Richard had been siphoning millions from the estate for years through fake development projects. Mom discovered it early, but instead of exposing him, she joined him. Tyler became useful because he needed constant bailouts for gambling and drugs. Eventually, Dad threatened divorce and criminal charges. That's when Richard started convincing Tyler that Dad loved Ellie more and planned to leave Tyler with nothing. Tyler's resentment spiraled into hatred. "Your brother worshipped Richard," Dad said quietly. "He wanted approval." That hurt more than I expected, because beneath all the rage and betrayal, Tyler was still deeply pathetic. Weak people become dangerous when someone manipulative gives them permission to blame others for their failures. Then Dad told me something I still think about constantly. "Your mother wasn't always like this." I stared at him in disbelief. "Seriously?" "She loved you when you were little. She helped cover up your murder." Dad nodded sadly. "Richard amplified the worst parts of her, but the selfishness was already there." That sentence stayed with me because it explained something important. Evil rarely appears all at once. It grows slowly through excuses, greed, jealousy, ego. By the time people recognize themselves, they're already monsters. The trials lasted nearly a year, and yes, they became a media circus. Wealthy family betrayal, fake death, inheritance fraud, attempted murder, it had everything. There were documentaries before the trial even ended. Tyler took a plea deal eventually, 22 years. Richard fought everything until the bitter end, and lost spectacularly after forensic accountants uncovered additional fraud victims across multiple states. Attempted murder, conspiracy, financial crimes, obstruction, 73 years total. My mother surprised everyone by testifying against Richard at the last second, hoping for leniency. The prosecutor still destroyed her. "You protected wealth over your own child," he told her in court, repeatedly. She got 18 years. The last time I saw her was after sentencing. She looked smaller somehow, older, fragile. She cried the second I entered the visitation room. "Ellie, please." Same tone she used my entire life whenever she wanted forgiveness without accountability. I sat across from her quietly. "Did you ever love me?" She looked genuinely shocked by the question. "Of course I did." "Then why was I always disposable?" Her face crumpled, but noticed something important. She never answered the question, because she couldn't. Some parents love their children conditionally, as extensions of themselves, as emotional tools, but not as people. "Your father ruined this family," she whispered weakly. And there it was, even now, even after prison, still blaming someone else. I stood up immediately. "No," I said calmly, "you did." Then I walked out forever. The craziest part? I got the trust back eventually, most of it anyway. Enough money to erase every debt, buy a home, help Sophie restart her life, and disappear from public attention for a while. But honestly, the money stopped mattering somewhere along the way.
Because the real victory wasn't inheritance. It was surviving them. It was finally understanding I was never crazy, selfish, dramatic, or difficult. I was the only person in that family who kept telling the truth. And sometimes, toxic families punish truth harder than violence. Last month, Noah and I got married in a tiny private ceremony by the ocean. No press, no extended relatives, just peace. Dad walked me down the aisle himself. Halfway to the altar, he squeezed my hand and whispered something I'll probably remember for the rest of my life. You were the strongest one the whole time. For years, my family treated me like the weak link because I was the easiest to blame. Turns out, I was the only one who didn't sell my soul when money got involved. And honestly, that's worth more than $12 million ever was.